Ladies and gentlemen, here it is at last. I was hoping to release this sooner, but Genshin Impact and other real-life stuff kept me busy for a little while. For those of us wondering what's going on, this is essentially the second part of an analysis on the Does Not Commute game. During the first one, we discussed time travel and the company that was running everything from the shadows. We talked about several characters, such as spiritual advisor Jensen, Julia, and the people involved in V Intelligence Inc. If you want to see that video, I'll put it in the description and in a card that should be appearing on the screen right now. It is highly advisable to watch that one before this one, as it gives vital information on what's going on during the whole ordeal. This one is going to be dealing with the main relationships between the characters. There's many of them to keep track of, so I'll do my best to cover them as thoroughly as possible. And without further ado, let's get started. Another day, another boring commute to work. As dentist Charles Schneider goes to his clinic, hell-bent on changing the world as we know it, an ordinary postwoman named Betty pulls all her stops in a rapid and efficient manner. She's an older woman, liberated from the insecurities and doubts of her younger counterparts. She knows the card she has been dealt with by life. And right now, she only wants one thing, and that is quality time with the strong man like Mr. Beck. Today, she's feeling extremely sexy. She's wearing her leopard pattern underwear. She even noticed strange glares by her coworkers as she strolls assertively through the office on her way to get the assignments for the day. She pays no mind to that. She only cares about his attention. She can't wait to surprise him, as she knows how much he seemed to enjoy the last visit where she wore that stuff. As she gets closer to his house, her excitement only grows in strength. She parks her van in a secluded place and combs her hair one more time before heading toward Mr. Beck's house. The back of her van has no more mail to deliver for the time being. No one at work will notice her absence. She knocks on the door, and before she knows it, she's getting touchy-touchy with the man that she dearly loves. The only testimony of their love remains in the prying eyes of a voyeuristic man hiding behind some bushes with a binocular set hanging from his neck. Things don't go as expected. A stressed-out Mrs. Beck is speeding through the neighborhood on her way back home. As she's doing double the speed limit in the suburbs, all she can do is swear loudly and ask herself why she left that damn keycard at home. She's already late to work. She'll get reprimanded from the boss. But just as she thinks things cannot go any worse, she finds her man in a loving embrace with another woman. The man she married that long ago is cheating on her. Instantly, her work troubles leave her mind as she closes the door behind herself. Few know what happened behind closed doors. The voyeur only managed to see the rage in her eyes and the ambulance speeding toward the house. The paramedics find themselves a harrowing scene straight out of their nightmares. Not even a single one of them could keep their breakfast down. A few miles near, a man named Dwayne drives his garbage truck. He seems like he's in a good mood. As he makes a right, he pats his right side pocket where he has his wallet stored. There, he holds the picture of a pretty lady that he found in a trash can a while ago. He finds all sorts of stuff in the trash. People forget all sorts of valuable things in there all the time. However, to him, there's nothing more precious than that picture. As a matter of fact, he's on his way to visit some museums all around the city to gather inspiration. Then, he will deliver some materials he found in his shift to make a new sculpture based on his muse. That way, the degradation of the paper of the photo or the faultiness of his memory won't be able to erase her from his memory. But let's get back to the scene at Beck's house. The postwoman hasn't been seen in public yet, and Mr. Beck has suffered a very unfortunate accident that doesn't let him drive. He undergoes surgery and manages to stay out of the grave. Unfortunately, some parts of him don't have the same fate, and now he has to adjust to his new situation. But the worst thing for him is the fact that his wife is not talking to him anymore. Last time we see him, he's on his way to a hotel after she changed the locks on the house. Seems like divorce is just around the corner. How is Mrs. Beck taking in the news? Not great, honestly. She can't stop herself from crying as she takes a drive to the garbage dump to drop some leftover things from Mr. Beck. There, she finds the most unexpected thing that she's ever seen. Something that changed her life for good. Seems like our friend Dwayne has been working hard for a while. All his visits to the museum and his raids on the garbage dump and random trash cans from the neighborhood have paid off. He has built a 13 feet tall statue of Mrs. Beck, the woman represented in that crumpled memento that he carries around. Mrs. Beck is astounded, to say the least. She watches as a funny-looking, bearded man pulls out an old photograph of her. She remembers putting it on the bin, thinking that she looked horrible in it. But that man seems to treat it like the Holy Grail. Let's give both of them some intimacy for the time being. At the same time as the incident at Mrs. Beck's house, another tired woman leaves her house. Mrs. Mayfield has not been sleeping enough these last couple of months. Her man seems obsessed about Yorkshire Terriers. He talks about them non-stop, night and day. The pressure is slowly building from both home and work affairs. The idea of divorce has crossed her mind for a while now. After all, he's not the man that she chose to marry. Mr. Mayfield isn't concerned about that at all. He is, of course, thinking about Yorkshire Terriers. But the weirdest thing of all, they don't even have a pet. Instead, he's more interested in becoming one. He heads out to his favorite costume shop to pick up his latest acquisition, an adult-sized Yorkshire Terrier suit. His furry mania takes him all around the town with his new suit. But he's not done yet. He goes one step further. He heads to the private club with the intention of showing his true nature. Although people are having none of that, and they call the police. Police Officer Johnson hears all kinds of chatter about the canine incidents of Mr. Mayfield on the radio. He ends up getting arrested, and his story makes the headlines the next day. Let's turn our attention to Mrs. Clemens for now. A widow struck with grief has seen her deceased husband's car all through the city. Like a dark specter, the car roams the streets as if there's nothing wrong with that. Mrs. Clemens can't explain such a phenomenon, and she turns to spiritual advisor Clark. You all remember Clark from the latest Does Not Commute video, I hope. Turns out he charges his clients large sums of money and uses it to fund extravagant stuff like the very self-driving car that haunts Mrs. Clemens. Unfortunately, the last time we hear about the widow is when she went out into the night looking for the car of her deceased husband. Hopefully she managed to find out that it was all a ruse. Every single story we have talked about so far involves marital or serious romantic relationships, but now it's time to talk about family ties. For example, there's the Womack brothers. Federal investigator Maya Cheney is assigned to a very interesting case from Internal Affairs. Certain bureau equipment has been disappearing from time to time, as well as some of the vehicles assigned to unsuspecting agents. There's no priority in this case, after all. All of the stolen materials have ended up reappearing inside HQ in mint condition, but Mia is curious about what's going on. She also has a prime suspect. That is Ben Womack, cleaner and park amusement enthusiast. Ever since she has known him, he always seems to gravitate towards agents in active duty. He can't stop himself from prying too much into active investigations. He's even been reprimanded by the higher-ups a couple of times, but he keeps doing it. Her best lead on the case is Jennifer Womack, her sister. She seems tired of her brother's antics, but ends up chasing him around. She cares deeply for him, and she seems hurt about her brother's instability to distinguish reality from fiction. Her wild chase all around the city for her brother has served Mia a great deal, but at the end of the day, all the equipment, including the missing van, has resurfaced inside HQ without any lead that could indicate any misuse or negligence. The interrogation is also futile. When asked about his involvement, he shrugs off and says he's just a humble servant of the Bureau. Then he makes a barrage of questions about her work, trying to get a better grasp on her assignments. He also mumbles something about weird lights on Glover Boulevard. Nothing of use for her, unfortunately. And speaking of weird people, what about Mr. Lee? He seems like a changed man, doesn't he? He looks just like him, and they even have the same speaking mannerisms, but something just feels off with him. People all around him have noticed this sudden change, but they don't do anything about it, so it ends up becoming the norm. A few miles away, Dr. Mr. Ruiz hears strange whimpers and noises coming off of a certain container. As soon as he hears it, he drives his forklift far, far away. He's been working on the docks long enough to know that the contents of the container are none of his business. Life goes on as usual. Sometimes, this mysterious stranger hops out of bed and drives toward the docks with a photo album, all dressed in black. He enters the container and flips through the pages, revealing cute familiar photos of Mr. Lee's family with the newly renovated Mr. Lee. Then he leaves, as if nothing has happened. Life goes on as usual. Let's leave Mr. Lee for a minute to focus on the casual relationships, the one-offs, and the flings. The heat of the moment can make you do things you would have a hard time explaining to your close ones. Love or hate them, they are important, and we need to acknowledge them. Let's start with Dr. Trevino, with her own personal journey of liberation. She has recently discovered the pleasures of driving without pants. She drives her red sports car with a smile on her face, as she winks at several motorists driving through the area. It's very probable that she has caused some accidents on the way to her lunch meeting. However, it doesn't cross her mind that on the road you can get pulled over by the cops at any time. Nothing has prepared Police Officer Johnson and the doctor for the embarrassment that they're about to experience. Somewhere else, the time travel experiments bring together a fair maiden from the Middle Ages and a Cro-Magnon, and they seem quite friendly with each other. Maybe a bit too friendly. Somehow, they manage to grab a taxi to reach the water park, in order to have quite the memorable date, both for the people witnessing the event and themselves. To end the video, let's talk about the lonely ones, single people looking for their significant other in this big, scary world where intergalactic beings, mutants, and beings from other times roam the streets of the city unimpeded. Who has time for love after contemplating life's finer oddities, anyway? Well, there's also another obstacle for the lonesome beings that roam this world. There's work to be done. Mr. Baker knows it better than anyone. He's a marketing director working all around the city, producing new and innovative marketing campaigns for local clients. But internally, something is growing. Mr. Baker was never good with feelings. Born with a rare taste bud disorder taking away the pleasures of good food, and a supposedly strict upbringing has developed inside of him an unhealthy relationship with work. Creating slogans is all he has done so far. We see his mental breakdown all through the game. Eating at fancy restaurants, sailing, spending time at the amusement park, and playing golf stop generating satisfaction for him. This state of distress reaches a tipping point at the end of the day as he drives away from the golf course with tears streaming down his face. The same thing happens to Miss Santiago and Mr. Solis, who are going through tough times with things related to their work. We never hear about them again, but hopefully they left and did something a little bit more satisfactory for their lives. But not everything is bad in Single Land. Pervy little Mr. Turner gets his rocks off by watching people go on with their lives. He owns a pair of binoculars and night vision glasses. If Police Officer Johnson ever gets his hands on him, he's gonna have to spend some time in the slammer. We'll talk about him in the next video. I got a neat little theory that would fit best with the themes in the next video. There's also Mrs. Decker, a woman who hopes to give herself some well-deserved self-love in the tunnel of love while her family enjoys the roller coasters. Well, she's not really single, she has a family and a significant other. But sometimes people in relationships need some space to enjoy themselves every once in a while, don't they? That's all I have for you today. The destiny has separated certain couples and brought together some others. Now, Dwayne and Mrs. Beck share a long life full of happy moments. Mrs. Wayfair goes and gets herself a new dog to replace the one that she used to live with. Mr. Baker is nowhere to be found. Last time someone heard about him, he was at the small sea town knitting sweaters for injured penguins. What about Mr. Lee and the imposter? Turns out Mr. Lee had a twin brother with criminal tendencies. Now they live together as one and share everything, including the car. There seems to be zero animosity between them. Let's hope things stay that way for the foreseeable future, for the sake of Mr. Lee. If you liked what you heard today, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the channel. There's going to be one more part talking about the paranormal and the more outlandish parts of the story, and I'll also wrap up my coverage of the story of this amazing game. See you all in the next one. Goodbye.